A good presentation aid can go a long way in providing clarity, support, and interest within your speech. In fact, there are a lot of reasons a speaker might want to incorporate a visual aid into a speech. In this video, I'll briefly discuss the advantages of using a presentation aid, discuss the types of visuals available to a speaker, and tips for incorporating a presentation aid into a speech. First things first, why do you as the listener like a presentation aid? Likely it's because the visual aid is interesting. It can add variety into the speech and allows the listener the opportunity to access the information in a visual format. This is especially beneficial for someone who learns visually. Other reasons a presentation aid can be beneficial to a speech includes grabbing the audience's attention. A succinct visual can help to clarify ideas, enhance learning, and decrease confusion within the content of the information. Numerous studies have shown that visual messages combined with verbal messages can increase audience retention of material significantly. I'm sure you'd agree it's easier to remember a lecture when it includes a visual component. Sometimes that's all we can remember. When we increase retention of our messages, we ensure that our audience will carry it with them long after it has been delivered. A presentation aid is also effective in increasing the credibility of the speaker. Like an oral citation, the presentation aid reveals a source of supporting material that further emphasizes the point you are conveying. Complex ideas, difficult explanations, and even persuasive appeal can be improved through the use of a strong presentation aid. A speaker must take care when utilizing a presentation aid, though. If not utilized properly, it can take away from the information, add confusion, and distract from the audience. For this reason, I'll give you a few tips in my third point. But before I do that, I want to share with you the options that you have available to you when selecting the best aid to support, clarify, enhance, or add interest within your speech. I am absolutely positive you're familiar with each type, but I want to give you a quick run through and things to think about. First, it's important to distinguish the aid from the delivery tool. Remember, a PowerPoint presentation is not a presentation aid, rather the presentation tool. A handout is not an aid, it's the presentation tool. Both should be considered as you evaluate your audience in the context for this speech. The first visual on my list is a drawing. It's not overly used by speakers, but I found that students will typically utilize a drawing in the event they receive feedback from their audience that the explanation provided is confusing. I had a student one semester who was speaking on competition bowling. She said, you know how regular pins are set up in recreational bowling? She said the competition bowling has a setup that's similar with just fewer pins. She turned to the board and drew the pin setup. This was so valuable in meeting the needs of her audience. A cartoon would be an excellent example of drawings as well. There are risks in using a drawing though, as not all of us are artists. Consider your own skill level. If I were to use a drawing, it would certainly cause more confusion than good and probably be embarrassing. A diagram could be beneficial if explaining portions of a process or part of a whole. I use this example to explain that there are cuts of meat, and did you know you could eat every portion of a mountain goat? The value comes from you being able to visualize all parts that you could eat, including the hooves and legs. A photograph, like in the introduction, is very commonly used among speakers. There's value and there is risk. When you utilize a presentation aid, you have to remember the goal is for the aid to clarify, support, and add interest. The photograph should prove your point even. If I wanted to discuss the impact of urbanization in India, I could compare it to the US. When we build in areas that were rural or undeveloped, we see an increase in adjusting animal population, i.e. we see a lot of dead deer on the side of the road. In India, the same is occurring. but their population is the elephant population. The deer removal in Arkansas looks much different than elephant removal in India. As you can imagine, it's more costly, it's more dangerous, and it's an issue. I've utilized this photograph to prove my point, to show you an image that you may not be able to conjure on your own. I'll let the visual work for me. Using charts and graphs is beneficial when making a comparison or showing a trend. A map is helpful when discussing a particular region specific to your topic. This type of map would be beneficial if I wanted to show you the concentration of, let's say, social media users in the world. It's an easy comparison and visually impactful. A timeline is helpful when showing progression, and a text list would be beneficial if you have a list of items that you are explaining. If utilizing a video, consider the content of the information. A video should not replace the speaker. Rather, like all presentation aids, should support and clarify the information with your speech. If you cannot say it better than the video, it would be appropriate to use. Careful of the overall length of the video, though. It should be quick and concise. Now that I've given you a quick list of advantages, covered a few available options for visuals, let me share with you tips for utilizing presentation aids and tools. I want to emphasize to you in the use of any visual or presentation aid and encourage you to remember that the presentation aid works for you. You do not work for the presentation aid, meaning the presentation aid is supporting what you are discussing. It is not giving of the information. Always reference your presentation aid and explain its purpose. Practice this the day before of your speech and know what you want to say and how much time it will take to discuss the components. Make certain you are not speaking to your presentation aid. Don't turn your back on your audience while you reference the aid. This gives your audience the opportunity to disengage because you've lost eye contact and directed your voice to the wall. Use your handed gesture instead to make certain that you're still speaking to your audience. Always remember Murphy's Law. If something bad can happen, it will. So plan for emergencies. Know how you'll distribute your aid if the projector's not working. Have a handout available, a backup video, etc. Plan for emergencies. Use progressive revelation and aim for back row comprehension. Show your audience the presentation aid when you want them to have it. This is progressive revelation. I encourage my students to put a blank slide between each visual if presenting with PowerPoint. This improves the transition from slide to slide with progressive revelation incorporated. You don't want to display the aid throughout your presentation because chances are your audience will become distracted. There are a lot of ads next to YouTube videos. When you do show them the aid, make certain the person sitting in the very last row can see what information is included. Having the content too large is better than too small. If you're utilizing a handout as a presentation tool, wait to distribute it until the end. If the audience needs the information during your speech, hand it out, face down, and tell them when they can turn it over. Then remind them to turn it back over when you're done. Never pass around objects while you're speaking. Your visual works for you. It will not if your audience is distracted by the passing. Finally, make certain your presentation aid is professionally and neatly produced. Don't use the whiteboard to draw a chart when it could be easily created on a slide. Don't increase the size of a photo that was meant to be a thumbnail on a website. The visuals are a reflection of your time and energy given to the presentation. Be certain it reflects correctly. A presentation aid can be a valuable tool if used correctly. Find an aid that supports, enhances, clarifies, or illustrates the point you're trying to make within your speech. Remember, when the aid works for you, you will be certain to have success in your next presentation.